Just reload.
Wauw, de katten nemen echt troep mee.
Come on. Oh. I wonder, will this work? It probably should work because there's a... Ah, it's live because Rincy left the
We're
spot.
live.
Oh wow, this is
I,
this is wonderful.
I distracted the mothership.
Yeah.
I did that, with the cat food.
Wow, the timing is...
I went to go get it.
Yes, yes, the timing is perfect.
Yeah.
Hello people, welcome to another Cats and Coffee, and immediately the chat demands your ears. Which is
But
funny.
I've never worn cat ears during a story time stream. Then I want my head free, so I can think.
Well, I guess people want... people can't recognize you with without the ears or anything. Anyway, people also forget that this is the wrong one to do their demands in. That's the other one.
That's the other one.
No oracle here. Just a lovely lady who is going to tell you a lovely story, which is...
The Tale of Peter Rabbit.
Wabbit?
Wabbit.
Cool.
By Beatrix Potter.
Cool. Let's see. As per usual, Rincy will be ignoring the chat and I will be manning the chat from now on. So if there's a comment from Howling Riot, it's me. If we don't expect Els to drop in tonight. If she does, I hope she puts in her name as well. Otherwise, I am too lazy to do so, so you know it's me.
Yeah.
Rinty will be taking breaks in between, where I am going to try to update her on all the crazy stuff going on in the chat, or not, if everyone is too bewitched while they listen to the wonderful story. So yeah, and Doctor dug up some potatoes. Well, okay, the craziness already starts.
Alright.
Manning the chat. Oh, dude, really?
Oh, good.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I will be shutting up now, so Rincy can do her thing.
Alright. We're going to tell this story that some of you have already been looking forward to, and I found a version that has pictures. It leaves very little space for text, but I figured that I'd make the sacrifice so you could enjoy the pictures because they're just too beautiful. And I'll just see if I manage to read it the way things are spaced out. You gotta keep a challenge sometimes. So here we go. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were very good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden. Oh, shit. Cats. 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 No, cats. The
and
mother
immediately the
shipper sent me kittens.
and immediately the cats wreck the story.
Okay, this is why you always gotta have your bribing materials ready. Like, we're going to distract you. Here, be distracted. There, be a good little distracted kitty. Monster. Really, monster. Speaking about very naughty kitties, let's go back to a very naughty rabbit. Uh, Peter, who was very naughty, almost as naughty as kittens, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes, and then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on four legs and went faster, so that I think he might not have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net, and he got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop on the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. And he rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently Peter sneezed. "Achoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot on Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to our family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a scratch, 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 scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some blackcurrant bushes. Kitten is trying to drink my water. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down on the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. Wow, that's fast.
What?
We have a break.
Oh, I heard the end. Was like, what?
Yeah, it says the end. Here,
It's
the end. The end? In the middle of a story? The
oh,
end?
uh,
I don't get it.
what?
Yeah,
We've been streaming for 14 minutes.
yeah, okay. This is short. I thought the story was longer.
Well, at least people can't. Yeah. See, people, we're doing this live.
Yeah,
uh, so were we curious.
all
It's
right.
short. It's a very short story. I mean,
It's ultra short.
yeah.
Is there a Tale of Peter Rabbit series?
uh,
How many Peter Rabbit stories are there? 23 titles. See, it has to.
The world of. Oh, you know that everyone is can see what you're scrolling, right?
Yeah, well, it's no secret, right?
Oh, in the Peter's abridged series says that's it. Well, yeah. In the meantime, you've people have been talking about the gardens and plants growing, and of course, Phoenicia has to rub it in that there's 9 more followers to go. Yeah, I don't know where the.
Yeah.
But it's a good thing I know that this one's already that tale's already in. So,
Mm.
school tube, really?
Yeah, I'll just leave a more beautiful picture
Yeah,
on, and I'll see if I can find it in a different. Uh,
format.
yeah,
Oh wow, this well to to the ones Untitled Rabbit Game, every gardener's nightmare. It's funny that Elsa
yeah,
actually says that because we have been playing Untitled Goose Game together and it was fun. Oh wow, the funny part, people, is that we have been talking about the possibility of the story ending before the stream does, but
I
not
didn't know
after
it would
40
happen.
minutes.
No,
Wait, less actually. But
that was really,
you know
really fun.
this is good as well. I mean, Furry now gets to listen to my voice again, so
Oh, that must have been missed.
yeah, this must brighten up his day that he can get to listen to me before he goes to bed.
Hmm.
Then Setsu says, time to make up a new story. Well, of course, everyone is curious about the Reninzi original.
Yeah, I have some that I was considering lately to start working one out. I felt inspired, but I've not had any time to do it. And I thought other things were a bit more uh, urgent.
Hmm.
Let's see. I don't get the sequels.
Well, in the meantime, are you still enjoying these story streams, people? I think so because there's
Not
always
like
a
this.
loyal following. In our version, Peter starts up a jacket factory and makes new ones for all the rabbits in the neighborhood, till he runs out of thread and he knows where to find more. Oh, a bit spoilery. And I do think that people loved seeing, I think Lara breaking your stuff.
Yeah, the kittens, they try to drink my water. They try to type stuff, go to browse different pages. Yeah.
Uh, we couldn't make this stuff up even if we tried. See you later then, Setsu.
Oh, I think I have something here.
Good.
A list of titles. Yeah, The Tale of Peter Rabbit, A Tale of Squirrel Nutkin, The Tailor of Gloucester, The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. It's a lot of animals in this universe. So I think that I'll just read these.
So these would be the tales of Beatrix Potter. Potter.
Yeah, I'll show. Um, does this work? No, of course it doesn't work. On wiki source or whatever a list of titles.
Okay.
So I can just go and open the next one.
Okay, I'm going to mess
The
around
only
with the.
sad, yeah, the only sad thing is the.
It's okay, that's my problem. At least people get to see live what we have to do in order to make this look a bit better. So I'm not even going to hide it. I'm just going like, let's go ham on this thing and see what it does. Are you going to start reading already, or?
Uh,
Oh,
is that okay?
oh yeah, it is. I get to mess with the settings, and people just have to can see me fool around with it like this. So
Right.
it's going to be good.
The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin, also by Beatrix Potter, author of The Tale of Peter Rabbit. This is a tale about a tale that belonged to a little red squirrel, and his name was Nutkin. He had a brother called Twinkleberry and a great many cousins. They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. In the middle of the lake there is an island covered with trees and nut bushes, and amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree, which is the house of an owl who is called Old Brown. One autumn, when the nuts were ripe and the leaves on the hazel bushes were golden and green, Nutkin and Twinkleberry and all the other little squirrels came out of the wood and down on the edge of the lake. They made little rafts out of twigs, and they paddled away over the water to Owl Island to gather nuts. Each squirrel had a little sack and a large oar, and spread out his tail for a sail. They also took with them an offering of 3 fat mice as a present for Old Brown, and put them down upon his doorstep. Then Twinkleberry and the other little squirrels each made a low bow and said politely, "Oh, Mr. Brown, will you favor us with permission to gather nuts upon your island?" But Nutkin was excessively impertinent in his manners. He bobbed up and down like a little red cherry, singing, riddle me, rot-tot-total, a little wee man in a red, red coat, a staff in his hand, a stone in his throat, and if you tell me this riddle, I'll give you a groat. Now this riddle is as old as the hills. Mr. Brown paid no attention whatever to Nutkin. He shut his eyes obstinately and went to sleep. The squirrels filled their little sacks with nuts and sailed away home in the evening. But the next morning they all came back again to Owl Island, and Twinkleberry and the others brought a fine fat mole and laid it on the stone in front of Old Brown's doorway and said, "Mr. Brown, will you favor us with your gracious permission to gather some more nuts?" But Nutkin, who had no respect, began to dance up and down, tickling Mr. Brown with a nettle and singing, "Oh, Mr. B, riddle me ree, hitty pitty with the wall, hitty pitty without the wall. If you touch hitty pitty will bite you." Mr. Brown woke up suddenly and carried the mole into his house. He shut the door in Nutkin's face. Presently A little thread of blue smoke from a wood fire came up from the top of the tree, and Nutkin peeped through the keyhole and sang, a house full, and you cannot gather a bowl full." The squirrels searched for nuts all over the island and filled their little sack. But Nutkin gathered oak apples, yellow and scarlet, and sat upon a beech stump playing marbles and watching the door of old Mr. Brown. On the third day, the squirrels got up very early and went fishing. They caught 7 fat minnows as a present for Old Brown. They paddled over the lake and landed under a crooked chestnut tree on Owl Island. Twinkleberry and 6 other little squirrels each carried a fat minnow, but Nutkin, who had no nice manners, brought no present at all. He ran in front, singing, "The man in the wilderness said to me, 'How many strawberries grow in the sea?' I answered him, 'As good as I thought good, as many red herrings as grow in the wood.' Yeah, yeah." But old Mr. Brown took no interest in riddles, not even when the answer was provided for him. On the fourth day, the squirrels brought a present of 6 fat beetles, which were as good as plums in plum pudding for Old Brown. Each beetle was wrapped up carefully in a dock leaf, fastened with a pine needle pin. But Nutkin sang as rudely as ever. "Old Mr. B, riddle me ree, flower of England, fruit of Spain, met together in a shower of rain, put in a bag, tied around with a string. If you tell me this riddle, I'll give you a ring. Yeah, yeah." Which was ridiculous of Nutkin, because he had not any ring to give to old Mr. Brown. The other squirrels hunted up and down the nut bushes, but Nutkin gathered robin's pincushions of a briar bush and stuck them full of pine needle pins. On the 5th day, the squirrels brought a present of wild honey. It was so sweet and sticky that they licked their fingers as they put it down upon the stone. They had stolen it out of a bumblebee's nest on the tippity top of the hill. But Nutkin skipped up and down singing, "Hum a bum, buzz, buzz, hum a bum, buzz. As I went over Triple Tyne, I met a flock of bunny swine, some yellow neckets, some yellow backets, and they were very bunniest swine that ever went over Triple Tyne." Old Mr. Brown turned up his eyes in disgust at the impertinence of Nutkin, but he ate up the honey. The squirrels filled their little sacks with nuts, but Nutkin sat upon a big flat rock and played pine pins with a crab apple and green fir cones. On the 6th day, which was Saturday, the squirrels came again for the last time. They brought a new laid egg in a little bush basket as a last parting present for Old Brown. But Nutkin ran in front, laughing and shouting, "Humpty Dumpty lies in the back, with a wide counterpane round his neck. 40 doctors and 40 wrights cannot put Humpty Dumpty to rights." Now old Mr. Brown took an interest in eggs. He opened one eye and shut it again. But still he did not speak. Nutkin became more and more impertinent. "Old Mr. B! Old Mr. B! Hickamore, Hickamore! On the king's kitchen door! All the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't drive Hickamore, Hickamore off the king's kitchen door!" Nutkin danced up and down like Sunbeam, but still Old Brown said nothing at all. Nutkin began again. "Our Thoroughpower has broken his band. He comes roaring up the land. A king of Scots with all his power cannot turn Arthur off the bower." Nutkin made a whirring noise to sound like the wind, and he took a running jump right onto the head of Old Brown. Then all at once there was a fuddlement and a scufflement and a loud squeak. The other squirrels scuttered away into the bushes. When they came back very cautiously, peeping round the tree, there was Old Brown sitting on his doorstep, quite still, with his eyes closed, as if nothing had happened. But Nutkin was in his waistcoat pocket. This looks like the end of the story, but it isn't. And you again. Your impertinence.
Oh, this was another one, right? Or did he jump on the keyboard again?
And on the laptop and everything, it doesn't matter how well I hide it. But
Huh,
I'm ready to continue.
good luck.
This looks like the end of the story, but it isn't. Old Brown carried Nutkin into his house and held him up by the tail, intending to skin him. But Nutkin pulled so very hard that his tail broke in two, and he dashed up the staircase and escaped out of the attic window. And here he is. And to this day, if you meet Nutkin up a tree and ask him a riddle, he will throw sticks at you and stamp his feet and scold and shout. The end. All right, that's how squirrels swear, apparently.
Probably. Oh, I think Els mentioned that the tale of Benjamin Bunny is the second half of the story we started. As for
Uh,
the chat, there's a lot of talk about houses, own produce, and
oh, that's
that
nice.
berries are yummy.
Berries are yummy. Yes, definitely. And Els is in the chat.
Well, she was a bit back.
Hmm. So, hello and goodbye.
Hmm.
All right. Then let's continue to the tale of Benjamin Bunny. Which was also mentioned in the previous story. One morning, a little rabbit sat on a bank. He pricked his ears and listened to the trit trot of a pony. A gig was coming along the road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in her best bonnet. As soon as they had passed, little Benjamin Bunny slid down into the road and set off with a hop, skip, and jump to call upon his relations, who lived in the wood at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. That wood was full of rabbit holes, and in the neatest, sandiest hole of all lived Benjamin's aunt and his cousins, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Old Mrs. Rabbit was a widow. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought a pair at the bazaar. She also sold herbs and rosemary tea and rabbit tobacco, which is what we call lavender. Lil Benjamin did not very much want to see his aunt. He came round the back of the fir tree and nearly tumbled upon the top of his cousin Peter. Peter was sitting by himself. He looked poorly and was dressed in a red cotton pocket handkerchief. "Peter," said little Benjamin in a whisper, "who has got your clothes?" Peter replied, "The scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden." And he described how he had been chased about the garden and had dropped his shoes and coat. Little Benjamin sat down beside his cousin and assured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out in a gig, and Mrs. McGregor also, and certainly for the day, because she was wearing her best bonnet. Peter said he hoped that it would rain. At this point, old Mrs. Rabbit's voice was heard inside the rabbit hole calling, "Cottontail! Cottontail! Fetch some more chamomile!" Peter said he thought he might feel better if he went for a walk. They went away hand in hand and got upon the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the wood. From here they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were plainly to be seen upon the scarecrow, topped with an old tam o' shanter of Mr. McGregor's. Little Benjamin said, "It spoils people's clothes to squeeze under a gate. The proper way to get in is to climb down a pear tree." Peter fell down head first, but it was of no consequence, as the bed below was newly raked and quite soft. It had been sown with lettuces. They left a great many odd little footmarks all over the bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs. Little Benjamin said that the first thing to be done was to get back Peter's clothes, in order that they might be able to use the pocket handkerchief. They took them off the scarecrow. There had been rain during the night, there was water in the shoes, and the coat was somewhat shrunk. Benjamin tried on the tam o' shanter, but it was too big for him. Then he suggested that they should fill the pocket handkerchief with onions, as a little present for his aunt. Peter did not seem to be enjoying himself. He kept hearing noises. Benjamin, on the contrary, was perfectly at home and ate a lettuce leaf. He said that he was in the habit of coming to the garden with his father to get lettuces for their Sunday dinner. The name of little Benjamin's papa was old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. The lettuces certainly were very fine. Peter did not eat anything. He said he should like to go home. Presently he dropped half the onions. Little Benjamin said that it was not possible to get back up the pear tree with a load of vegetables. He led the way boldly towards the other end of the garden. They went along a little walk on planks, under a sunny red brick wall. The mice sat on their doorsteps, cracking berry stones. They winked at Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. Presently, Peter let the pocket handkerchief go again. They got amongst flower pots and frames and tubs. Peter heard noises worse than ever. His eyes were as big as lollipops. He was a step or two in front of his cousin when he suddenly stopped. This is what those little rabbits saw around that corner. Little Benjamin took one look and then, in half a minute, less than no time, he hid himself and Peter and the onions underneath a large basket. The cat got up and stretched herself and came and sniffed at the basket. Perhaps she liked the smell of onions. Anyway, she'd sat down upon the top of the basket. She sat there for 5 hours. I cannot draw you a picture of Peter and Benjamin underneath the basket, because it was quite dark, and because the smell of onions was fearful. It made Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry. The sun got round behind the wood, and it was quite late in the afternoon, but still the cat sat upon the basket. At length there was a pitter patter, and some bits of mortar fell from the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Mr. Benjamin Bunny prancing along the top of the wall of the upper terrace. He was smoking a pipe of rabbit tobacco and had a little switch in his hand. He was looking for his son. Old Mr. Bunny had no opinion whatever of cats. He took a tremendous jump off the top of the wall onto the top of the cat and scuffed it off the basket and kicked it into the greenhouse, scratching off a handful of fur. The cat was too much surprised to scratch back. Oh, really? When old Mr. Bunny had driven the cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he came back to the basket and took out his son Benjamin by the ears and whipped him with a little switch. Then he took out his nephew Peter. Then he took out the handkerchief of onions and marched out of the garden. When Mr. McGregor returned about half an hour later, he observed several things which perplexed him. It looked as though some person had been walking all over the garden in a pair of clogs. Only the footmarks were too ridiculously little. Also, he could not understand how the cat could have managed to shut herself up inside the greenhouse, locking the door upon the outside. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him, because she was so glad to see that he had found his shoes and coat. Cottontail and Peter folded up the pocket handkerchief, and old Mrs. Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them from the kitchen ceiling, with the bunches of herbs and the rabbit tobacco. The end.
Wow, short stories these.
They are very, very short.
Yeah.
Maybe we can finish the entire book.
Well, at least Ferris is applauding.
Yay! Well, indeed, that cat is very lightweight. That's not much of a cat.
Lighter or heavier than Lara?
Oh, Lara, she would have not let go of that rabbit. Doesn't matter if it's bigger than her. She will bite it and eat it or try until she has no strength left, but she will not run away. She's a little feisty one.
Well, I mean, most of the cats from
From my place, yeah, they definitely know how to. Well, not all of them. I happen to know one who is
yeah,
a bit of a scaredy cat.
one scaredy cat, yes.
Hmm. All right. Oh, is this a mouse? I see a mouse and a cat. Yeah, this story about mice. Let's go. I
Have
don't know
fun.
if Gloucester is the right way to say it, but I think it is. And if not, then from now on in this universe, it is the right way to say it. The Tailor of Gloucester. In the time of swords and periwigs, and full-skirted coats with flowered lappets, when gentlemen wore ruffles and gold-laced waistcoats of uh, paduasoy and taffeta, there lived a tailor in Gloucester. He sat in the window of a little shop in Westgate Street, cross-legged on a table from morning till dark. All day long, while the light lasted, he sewed and snippeted, piecing out his satin and pompadour and lutestring. Stuffs had strange names and were very expensive in the days of the tailor of Gloucester. But although he sewed fine silk for his neighbor, he himself was very, very poor. A little old man in spectacles, with a pinched face and old crooked fingers, and a suit of threadbare clothes. He cut his coats without waste. According to his embroidered cloth, they were very small ends and snippets that lay about upon the table. Too narrow breadths for naught, except waistcoats for mice, said the tailor. One bitter cold day near Christmas time, the tailor began to make a coat of cherry-colored corded silk embroidered with pansies and roses, and a cream-colored satin waistcoat trimmed with gauze and green. And for the mayor of Gloucester, the tailor worked, and he talked to himself. He measured the silk and turned it round and trimmed it into shape with his shears. The table was all littered with cherry-colored snippets. No bread at all, and cut on the cross, it's no bread at all. Tippets for mice and ribbons for mobs. For mice, said the tailor of Gloucester. When the snowflakes came down against the small leaded window panes and shut out the light, the tailor had done his day's work. All the silk and satin lay cut out upon the table. There were 12 pieces for the coat, and 4 pieces for the waistcoat, and there were pocket flaps and cuffs and buttons, all in order. For the lining of the coat there was fine yellow taffeta, and for the buttonholes of the waistcoat there was cherry-colored twist, and everything was ready to sew together in the morning, all measured and sufficient, except that there was wanting just one single skein of cherry-colored twisted silk. The tailor came out of his shop at dark, for he did not sleep there at nights. He fastened the window and locked the door, and took away the key. No one lived there at nights but brown mice, and they ran in and out without any keys. For behind the wooden wainscots of all the old houses in Gloucester there are little mouse staircases and secret trap-doors, and the mice run from house to house through those long, narrow passages. They can run all over the town without going into the streets. But the tailor came out of his shop and shuffled home through the snow. He lived quite nearby in College Court, next the doorway to College Green. And although it was not a big house, the tailor was so poor he only rented the kitchen. He lived alone with his cat. It was called Simpkin. Now all day long while the tailor was out at work, Simpkin kept house by himself, and he also was fond of the mice, though he gave them no satin for coats. "Meow," said the cat when the tailor opened the door. "Meow." The tailor replied, "Simpkin, we shall make our fortune, but I am worn to a revelling. Take this groat, which is our last fourpence, and, Simpkin, take a china pipkin, buy a pennyworth of bread, a pennyworth of milk, and a pennyworth of sausages. And oh, Simpkin, with the last penny of our fourpence, buy me one pennyworth of cherry-colored silk. But do not lose the last penny of the fourpence, Simpkin, or I am undone and worn to a thread paper, for I have no more twist." Then Simpkin again said, "Meow," and took the groat and the pipkin and went out into the dark. The tailor was very tired and beginning to be ill. He sat down by the hearth and talked to himself about that wonderful coat. "I shall make my fortune to be cut bias. The mayor of Gloucester is to be married on Christmas Day in the morning, and he hath ordered a coat and an embroidered waistcoat to be lined with yellow taffeta, and the taffeta suffocate. There is no more left over in snippets than will serve to make tippets for mice." Then the tailor started, for suddenly interrupting him, from the dresser at the other side of the kitchen came a number of little noises. Tip tap, tip tap, tip tap tip. "Now, what can that be?" said the tailor of Gloucester, jumping up from his chair. The dresser was covered with crockery and pipkins, willow pattern plates, and teacups and mugs. The tailor crossed the kitchen and stood quite still beside the dresser, listening and peering through his spectacles. Again, from under a teacup came those funny little noises. Tip tap, tip tap, tip tap tip. "This is very peculiar," said the tailor of Gloucester, and he lifted up the teacup, which was upside down. Out stepped a little live lady mouse and made a courtesy to the tailor. Then she hopped away down off the dresser and under the wainscot. The tailor sat down again by the fire, warming his poor cold hands and mumbling to himself. The waistcoat is cut out from peach-colored satin, tambour stitch, and rosebuds in beautiful floss silk. Was I wise to entrust my last fourpence to Simpkin? 1 and 20 buttonholes of cherry-colored twist. But all at once, from the dresser, there came other little noises. Tip-tap, tip-tap, tip-tap-tip. "This is passing extraordinary," said the tailor of Gloucester, and turned over another teacup, which was upside down. Out stepped a little gentleman mouse, and made a bow to the tailor. And then, from all over the dresser, came a chorus of little tappings, all sounding together and answering one another, like watch beetles in an old worm-eaten window shutter. Tip-tap, tip-tap, tip-tap-tip. And out from under teacups and from under bowls and basins stepped other and more little mice, who hopped away down off the dresser and under the wainscot. The tailor sat down, close over the fire, lamenting, 1 and 20 buttonholes of cherry-colored silk. To be finished by noon on Saturday, and this is Tuesday evening. Was it right to let loose those mice, undoubtedly the property of Simpkin? Alack, I am undone, for I have no more twist. The little mice came out again and listened to the tailor. They took notice of the pattern of that wonderful coat. They whispered to one another about the taffeta lining and about the little mouse tippets. And then suddenly they all ran away together down the passage behind the wainscot, squeaking and calling to one another as they ran from house to house, and not one mouse was left in the tailor's kitchen when Simpkin came back with the pipkin of milk. Simpkin opened the door and bounced in with an angry "Meow!" like a cat that is vexed, for he hated the snow, and there was snow in his ears and snow in his collar at the back of his neck. He put down the loaf and the sausages upon the dresser and sniffed. "Simpkin," said the tailor, "where is my twist?" But Simpkin set down the pipkin of milk upon the dresser and looked suspiciously at the teacup. He wanted his supper of little fat mouse. "Simpkin," said the tailor, "where is my twist?" But Simpkin hid a little parcel privately in a teapot, and spit and growled at the tailor. And if Simpkin had been able to talk, he would have asked, "Where is my mouse?" "Alack, I am undone," said the tailor of Gloucester, and went sadly to bed. All that night long Simpkin hunted and searched through the kitchen, peeping into cupboards and under the wainscot, and into the teapot where he had hidden that twist. But still he found never a mouse. And whenever the tailor muttered and talked in his sleep, Simpkin said "Meow!" and made strange, horrid noises, as cats do at night. for the poor old tailor was very ill with a fever, tossing and turning in his four-post bed, and still in his dreams he mumbled, "No more twist! No more twist!" All that day he was ill, and the next day, and the next, and what should become of the cherry-colored coat? In the tailor's shop in Westgate Street the embroidered silk and satin lay cut out upon the table, 1 and 20 buttonholes, and who should come to sew them, when the window was barred and the door was fast locked? But that does not hinder the little brown mice. They run in and out without any keys through all the old houses in Gloucester. Out of doors the market folks went trudging through the snow to buy their geese and turkeys, and to bake their Christmas pies. But there would be no Christmas dinner for Simpkin and the poor old tailor of Gloucester. The tailor lay ill for 3 days and nights, and then it was Christmas Eve, and very late at night. The moon climbed up over the roofs and chimneys, and looked down over the gateway into College Court. There were no lights in the windows, nor any sound in the houses. All the city of Gloucester was fast asleep under the snow. And still Simpkin wanted his mice, and mewed as he stood beside the four-post bed. But it is in the old story that all the beasts can talk in the night between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in the morning, though there are very few folk that can hear them, or know what it is that they say. When the cathedral clock struck 12, there was an answer, like an echo of the chimes, and Simpkin heard it, and came out of the tailor's door and wandered about in the snow. From all the roofs and gables and old wooden houses in Gloucester came 1,000 merry voices singing the old Christmas rhymes, and all the old songs that ever I heard of, and some that I don't know, like Whittington's bells. First and loudest the cocks cried out, "Dame, get up and bake your pies." "Oh, dilly, dilly, dilly," sighed Simpkin. And now in a garret, where lights and sounds of dancing and cats came from over the way. "Hey, diddle, diddle, the cat and the fiddle, all the cats in Gloucester except me," said Simpkin. Under the wooden eaves the starlings and sparrows sang of Christmas pies. The jackdaws woke up in the cathedral tower, and although it was the middle of the night, the throstles and robins sang. The air was quite full of little twittering tunes. But it was all rather provoking to poor hungry Simpkin. Particularly he was vexed with some little shrill voices from behind a wooden lattice. I think that they were bats, because they always have very small voices, especially in a black frost, when they talk in their sleep, like the tailor of Gloucester. They said something mysterious that sounded like, "Buzz, quoth the blue fly, hum, quoth the bee, buzz and hum they cry, and so do we." And Simpkin went away shaking his ears as if he had a bee in his bonnet. From the tailor's shop in Westgate came a glow of light, and when Simpkin crept up to peep in at the window, it was full of candles. There was a snippeting of scissors and snappeting of thread, and little mouse voices sang loudly and gaily. 4 and 20 tailors went to catch a snail. The best man among them durst not to touch her tail. She put out all the horns like a little Kylo cow. Run, tailors, run, or she'll have you all in now. Then without a pause the little mouse voices went on again. Sieve my lady's oatmeal, grind my lady's flour. Put it in a chest, not let it stand an hour. Mew, mew, interrupted Simpkin, and he scratched at the door. But the key was under the tailor's pillow. He could not get in. The little mice only laughed and tried another tune. Three little mice sat down to spin. Pu- Pussy passed by and she peeped in. What are you at, my fine little men? Making coats for gentlemen. Shall I come in and cut off your threads? Oh no, Miss Pussy, you'd bite off our heads. Mew! Mew! cried Simpkin. Hey, diddle dinkety! answered the little mice. Hey, dinkle dickety, poppity pat, the merchants of London they wear scarlet, silk in the collar and gold in the hem, so merrily march the merchantmen. They clicked their thimbles to mark the time, but none of the songs pleased Simpkin. He sniffed and mewed at the door of the shop. And then I bought a pipkin and a popkin, a simpkin and a slopkin, for all 1 farthing. Wow, farthing. And upon the kitchen dresser, added the rude little mice. Mew! Scratch! Scratch! Scuffled Simpkin on the window sill, while the little mice inside sprang to their feet and all began to shout at once in little twittering voices. No more twist! No more twist! And they barred up the window shutters and shut out Simpkin. But still, through the nicks in the shutters, he could hear the click of thimbles and the little mouse's voices singing, no more twist, no more twist. Simpkin came away from the shop and went home, considering in his mind. He found the poor old tailor without fever, sleeping peacefully. Then Simpkin went on tiptoe and took a little parcel of silk out of the teapot and looked at it in the moonlight. And he felt quite ashamed of his badness compared with those good little mice. When the tailor awoke in the morning, the first thing which he saw upon the patchwork quilt was a skein of cherry-colored twisted silk, and beside his bed stood the repentant Simpkin. Alack, I am worn to a revelling, said the tailor of Gloucester, but I have my twist. The sun was shining on the snow when the tailor got up and dressed, and came out into the street with Simpkin running before him. The starlings whistled on the chimney stacks, and the throstles and robins sang, but they sang their own little noises, not the words they had sung in the night. Alack, said the tailor, I have my twist, but no more strength, nor time, than will serve to make me one single buttonhole, for this is Christmas Day in the morning. The Mayor of Gloucester shall be married by noon, and where is his cherry-colored coat? He unlocked the door in the little shop in Westgate Street, and Simpkin ran in, like cats that expect something. But there was no one there, not even one little brown mouse. The boards were swept and clean. The little ends of thread and the little silk snippets were all tidied away and gone from off the floor. But upon the table, oh joy! The tailor gave a shout. There, where he had left plain cuttings of silk, there lay the most beautifulest coat, an embroidered satin waistcoat that ever were worn by a mayor of Gloucester. There were roses and pansies upon the facings of the coat, and the waistcoat was worked with poppies and cornflowers. Everything was finished, except just one single cherry-colored buttonhole, and where that buttonhole was wanting, there was pinned a scrap of paper with these words in little teeny-weeny writing: "No more twist." And from then began the luck of the tailor of Gloucester. He grew quite stout, and he grew quite rich. He made the most wonderful waistcoats for all the rich merchants of Gloucester, and for all the fine gentlemen of the country round. Never were seen such ruffles, or such embroidered cuffs and lappets. But his buttonholes were the greatest triumph of it all. The stitches of those buttonholes were so neat, so neat. I wonder how they could be stitched by an old man in spectacles, with crooked old fingers, and a tailor's thimble. The stitches of those buttonholes were so small, they looked as if they had been made by little mice. The end.
So basically, that old guy had his own mouse sweatshop.
Yeah, that's how you do it, apparently. That's how Disney princesses do it as well.
Uh,
You need magic, you go get yourself some mice.
where? Well, Disney put the mouse to work. I mean, that's why.
Hmm.
Uh, oh god. Yeah. In the meantime, both Doctor and Furry have left,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, they mentioned beforehand.
yes, and the rest is still here. So
Well, good that you're all here.
love the little
Let's see.
singing parts in between, though.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it up as I go. I'm not trying to make it sound good. Just make it sound
I
funny
think
or
it
happy.
sounds fun, and I
Yeah,
hope the chat agrees.
I hope so too. And just uh it's worse, I think, if you're just going to read it like it's a poem. I could, but that's not how I figured that it was meant to be done. So then
Phoenicia thinks it's fun.
improvise.
Pharaohs thinks it's fun.
All right.
So I guess it's fun.
Yay. All right. I think we have time for one more story. If it's a short one.
Well, that's okay, and otherwise it will be an abrupt end like the tale of Peter Rabbit.
All right. So which shall we pick? Just the next one, Tiggy Winkle, or another one?
I would say the
I'm
next
gonna
one.
I'm gonna see. Is it a long story? No, it's not very long. Yeah, we're just gonna go. The Tale of Mrs. Tiggywinkle. Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Lucy who lived at a farm called Little Town. She was a good little girl, only she was always losing her pocket handkerchiefs. One day, little Lucy came into the farmyard crying. Oh, she did cry so. I've lost my pocket handkin. 3 handkins and a penny. Have you seen them, Tabby kitten? The kitten went on to washing her white paws. So Lucy asked a speckled hen, Sally Henny Penny, have you found 3 pocket handkins? But the speckled hen ran, in, ran into a barn, clucking, I go barefoot, barefoot, barefoot. And then Lucy asked Cock Robin, sitting on a twig. Cock Robin looked sideways as Lucy with his bright black eye, and he flew over a stile and away. Lucy climbed upon the stile and looked up at the hill behind Littletown, a hill that goes up, up, into the clouds, as though it had no top. And a great way up the hillside, she thought she saw some white things spread upon the grass. Lucy scrambled up the hill as fast as her short legs would carry her. She ran. Uh, wait. She ran along a steep pathway, up and up, until Littletown was right away down below. She could have dropped a pebble down the chimney. Presently, she came to a spring, bubbling out from the hillside. Someone had stood a tin can upon a stone to catch the water, but the water was already running over, for the can was no bigger than an egg cup. And where the sand upon the path was wet, there were footmarks of a very small person. Lucy ran on and on. The path ended under a big rock. The grass was short and green, and there were clothes props cut from bracken stems, with lines of plaited ruches, and a heap of tiny clothespins, but no pocket handkerchiefs. But there was something else, a door, straight into the hill, and inside it someone was singing. Lily white and clean, oh, little frills between, oh, smooth and hot, rusty spot, never here be seen, oh. Lucy knocked once, twice, and interrupted the song. A little frightened voice called out, Who's that? Lucy opened the door, and what do you think there was inside the hill? A nice clean kitchen with a flagged floor and wooden beams, just like any other farm kitchen. Only the ceiling was so low that Lucy's head nearly touched it, and the pots and pans were small, and so was everything there. There was a nice hot singy smell, and at the table, with an iron in her hand, stood a very stout, short person staring anxiously at Lucy. Her print gown was tucked up, and she was wearing a large apron over her striped petticoat. Her little black nose went sniffle, 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 and her eyes went twinkle, twinkle, and underneath her cap, where Lucy had yellow curls, that little person had prickles. "Who are you?" said Lucy. "Have you seen my pocket handkins?" The little person made a bob curtsy. "Oh yes, if you please. My name's Mr. Twiggywinkle. Oh yes, if you please. I am an excellent clear starcher." And she took something out of a clothes basket and spread it on the ironing blanket. "What's that thing?" said Lucy. That's not my pocket handkin. Oh no, if you please, that's a little scarlet waistcoat belonging to Cock Robin. And she ironed it and folded it and put it on one side. Then she took something else of a clothes horse. That isn't my pinny, said Lucy. Oh no, if you please, that's a damask tablecloth belonging to Jenny Wren. Look how it's stained with currant wine. It's very bad to wash, said Mrs. Tiggywinkle. Mrs. Tiggywinkle's nose went sniffle, sniffle, snuffle, and her eyes went twinkle, twinkle, and she fetched another hot iron from the fire. There's one of my pocket handkins, cried Lucy, and there's my penny. Mrs. Tiggywinkle ironed it, and goffered it, and shook out the frills. Oh, that is lovely, said Lucy. And what are those long yellow things with fingers like gloves? Oh, that's a pair of stockings belonging to Sally Henry Penny. Look how she's worn the heels out with scratching in the yard. She'll very soon go barefoot, said Mrs. Tiggywinkle. Why, there's another handkerchief, but it isn't mine. It's red. Oh no, if you please, that one belongs to old Mrs. Rabbit, and it did so smell of onions. I've had to wash it separately. I can't get out the smell. There's another one of mine, said Lucy. What are those funny little white things? That's a pair of mittens belonging to a tabby kitten. I only have to iron them. She washes them herself. There's my last pocket handkin, said Lucy. And what are you dipping into the basin of starch? They're little dicky shirt fronts belonging to Tom Titmouse. Most terrible particular, said Mr. Tiggywinkle. Now I've finished my ironing, I'm going to air some clothes. What are these dear, soft, fluffy things? Said Lucy. Oh, those are woolly coats belonging to the little lambs at Skelgill. Will their jackets take off? Asked Lucy. Oh, yes, if you please. Look at the sheep mark on the shoulder. And here's one mark for Gilsgard, and 3 that come from Littletown. They're always marked at washing, said Mrs. Tiggywinkle. And she hung up all sorts and sizes of clothes. Small brown coats of mice, and one velvety black moleskin waistcoat, and a red tailcoat with no tail belonging to Squirrel Nutkin, and a very much shrunk blue jacket belonging to Peter Rabbit, and a petticoat not marked that had gone lost in the washing, and at last the basket was empty. Then Mrs. Tiggywinkle made tea, a cup for herself and a cup for Lucy. They sat before the fire on a bench and looked sideways at one another. Mrs. Tiggywinkle's hand, holding the teacup, was a very, very brown and very, very wrinkly with the soap duds, and although her gown and her cap there were and all through her gown and cap there were hairpins sticking wrong end out, so that Lucy didn't like to sit too near to her. When they had finished tea, they tied up the clothes in bundles and Lucy's pocket handkerchiefs were folded up inside her clean pinny and fastened with a silver safety pin. And then they made up the fire with turf, and came out and locked the door, and hid the key under the door sill. Then away down the hill trotted Lucy and Mrs. Tiggywinkle with the bundles of clothes. All the way down the path little animals came out of the fern to meet them. The very first that they met was Peter Rabbit and Benjamin Bunny, and she gave them their nice clean clothes. And all the little animals and birds were so very much obliged to dear Mrs. Tiggywinkle, so that at the bottom of the hill, when they came to the stile, there was nothing left to carry except Lucy's one little bundle. Lucy scrambled up the stile with the bundle in her hand, and then she turned to say "Good night" and to thank the washerwoman. But what a very odd thing! Mrs. Tiggywinkle had not waited either for thanks or for the washing bill. She was running, running, running up the hill. And where was her white frilled cap, and her shawl, and her gown, and her petticoat? And how small she had grown, and how brown and covered with prickles! Why, Mrs. Tiggywinkle was nothing but a hedgehog. Now some people say that little Lucy had been asleep upon the stile, but then how could she have found 3 clean pocket handkins and a penny pinned with a silver safety pin? And besides, I have seen that door into the back of the hill called Cat Bells, and besides, I am very well acquainted with dear Mrs. Tiggywinkle. The end.
And Thurston's here comes with a Mrs. Tiggywinkle, the Stanley of the Potter universe. She connects the
Yeah,
stories.
yeah, she does.
And she runs a laundromat.
Yeah, well, that would actually be fun for a villain.
Hmm. Now that I think about it.
That would be very entertaining for a villain.
More than than the laundromat should hide his secret identity or her.
Yeah, well, there needs to be um well, it has to look like it's just something silly and nothing evil. What evil could there be behind a laundromat? There is no such thing as a
Drug
laundromat
lords,
mafia.
drug lords, Breaking Bad. Oh no, Mr. Tiggywinkle is Mrs. Glass. Oh wow.
Mhm.
Well, it was a good story again, and it was yeah, within the time frame.
Exactly.
So did you enjoy these stories after the reveal that it was a short story or were short stories?
Yeah, I am actually quite pleased to have found the link with all these stories because that means there is a universe. We can return to this and read all the stories, and they're all interconnected. So this should be fun for next streams as well. And Beatrix Potter is one of uh, the best known writers of children's books, so it is definitely worth reading everything that she created, and especially with all of it so beautifully illustrated. Yeah, I would enjoy to continue this on a next story stream.
That would be the next Cats and Coffee stream. That's not next week, but the week after that.
Yes.
Sounds very, very good. Then I guess this shall be the end of this Cats and Coffee stream. and we are going to do a raid to a channel called Snowmarite, which seems to be a
Mm-hmm.
very wholesome channel where things are being painted, and she was actually working on a jar of honey. I kid you not. But it looked very, very wholesome.
All right. Interesting.
So,
A jar of honey.
a jar of honey, yeah, and it looks really, really good
Not a
actually.
bottle of rum or
No,
a jar of
honey.
sand.
Yeah, no, a
Uh,
jar of honey.
jar of dirt, sorry.
Oh no, 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 that's in my head. Oh no. But for now, we're going to say good night. Next Sunday will be a usual stream of foxes and coffee.
Yes, thank you everybody for being there. And see you on the next one.
And get your raid call ready because we will be raiding in
Woo!
three, two,
Two,
one.